This episode includes discussions of mental illness, delusions, and psychotic events. Please listen with care.
Everybody in society needs to get training and education on mental health. And one of the pieces of that needs to be the basic symptoms of the most common mental illnesses or mental conditions.
I like to think of our conversation today as a conversation between two bipolar experts. I am a psychiatrist with expertise in treating people with bipolar disorder, and Greg is a bipolar expert by lived experience.
Welcome to Collaborative Endeavors, a podcast about how scientists from different areas of research come together to tackle big health challenges, leading to better therapies and healthier communities. Over the last 2 episodes, Major General Greg Martin regaled us with stories about his forever war with bipolar disorder, including early warning signs and his recovery journey. We also listened to his insightful exchange with Dr. Alex Liao, which provided insight into how textbook concepts in bipolar disorder can play out in the day-to-day life of a patient. In the final part of our series, we return to the conversation between Dr. Liao and General Martin. The general had just finished sharing examples of kindling phenomenon during his school years and how those early instances of his hypothymic personality slowly snowballed toward full bipolar disorder.
As you were talking about these stories, I can sense your enthusiasm and your excitement. So it's really fascinating to see that. But that brings up another concept that we have been discussing as well. Is, say, for example, if an individual comes to my office and they are describing depressive symptoms, and as a psychiatrist, it is so important for us to make sure that their depression is not secondary to bipolar, which is the bipolar depression versus the more quote-unquote standard depression, because the treatment can be very different. And as we know, if you don't properly diagnose someone with bipolar disorder, that can have really, really unfortunate consequences down the road. And one of the things we look for as a trained psychiatrist is this mood reactivity. Is sometimes you see this sudden shift. In your case, it's sudden shift. You were depressed for a while, and then suddenly there is this potentially very positive life event, and there's a sudden shift in your mood, and then you become basically on the other end of the spectrum. And this is also very related to another important concept as we try to understand bipolar disorder. And this concept is called reward sensitivity or reward hypersensitivity. And the definition of this concept is basically people with bipolar disorder, they can be easily excitable by potentially very rewarding events or experiences. And these events and experiences can potentially create urgency because you want to go after them. And then urgency can lead to disruptions in social rhythm, and disruption in social rhythm then leads to disruption in circadian rhythm. And as we know, circadian rhythm is so important for people with bipolar disorder, that maintaining the regularity of circadian rhythm is so important. And I know there are some great examples of this concept in your book. Could you talk about them a little bit?
The one that comes to mind first is the trip in June of 2014 to go to my son Patrick's Special Forces graduation at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So we were in DC and we had to drive. It's about six hours or so down to Fort Bragg. So I had gone out early that morning and done PT, physical training. And I was still in my gym clothes when the president of the National Defense University Foundation Board, he walked by our house and he saw me. He said, "Hey, General Martin, the board is meeting right now. I know you're going on this trip, but could you just come over and say a few words? They'd love to see you. They'd love to hear from you. Just say hi, 5 minutes, and then head out and get ready for the trip." I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that," not thinking there was any danger involved. And so we were supposed to leave for Fort Bragg at 9 o'clock. That was the plan. So I walked with the president over to the meeting room and had a cup of coffee. Everybody's in business suits. I'm in my gym clothes. So I'm dressed improperly, but I thought it was worth it to say hi to them. So I start talking, and I knew I was only supposed to talk for like 5 minutes, 10 at the most. And I just couldn't stop talking. That reward urgency, I just thrived, and I got dopamine rushes and endorphin rushes by talking to these people who were interested and, believed in me as their leader and that kind of thing. So I kept talking and talking, didn't realize that I had gone on for about a half an hour. And then finally the president pulled me aside and said, "Hey, sir, we got to start the meeting. You got to go home and get ready for your trip. So thanks a lot. That was great." Everybody clapped, and I walked out the door. Well, then I start seeing students and faculty members and interns and administrative staff. And I was so charged up that there was this positive urgency that I had to talk more. And I had to say hi to everybody. And I had to tell them about Global Security University and how it was the key to world peace. And this was a brilliant idea that was going to take National Defense University and the Department of Defense to the next level. And I literally roamed around the half dozen college university buildings, just going into classrooms and taking over and giving a little lecture. And this went on. I didn't have my cell phone with me. I lost total track of time. I didn't really know where I was. I just knew I was loving it, and I was having a blast, and I was so happy and so intensely manic. Then suddenly my aide, who was a young naval officer, he came running up to me. He said, "Sir, I've been looking for you for hours. I had no idea where you were. Maggie's been calling me. She needs to know where you are. She's in a panic because you were supposed to leave hours ago on your trip. Sir, you have to come with me." And he grabbed me and he basically dragged me back to our house, which was on the base. And Maggie was furious. She was so mad at me. We were supposed to leave at 9. It's now 4 p.m. And we have a long drive in front of us. And now we have rush hour traffic in Washington, D.C. And she's like, "I can't believe you did that. That's so rude. That's so inconsiderate." And now I'm, trying to, okay, how do I avoid the negative urgency of getting, yelled at by my, wonderful wife? And my son Connor was there. And he's like, "Dad, I can't believe you did that. That was so selfish and so wrong." And so finally I said, "Well, I have to go pack for the trip and get some food because I hadn't eaten all day and nothing." And Maggie said, "No, I've got food in the car and I've got clothes for you. Just get in." And so we started driving, and then things kind of settled down. And then I started furiously doing stuff on my phone, tons of emails and messages and all that, calling people. And then the phone started running out of juice. I said, "Oh my God, I have to have a phone. I'm a 2-star general. I'm the president of NDU." And so I said, "You have to pull over at a place, and I need a new phone charger for the car." And so then that killed another 20, 30 minutes. And but I got it. I'm doing my texting and everything. And then there was road construction. Now we're in a huge traffic jam. And Maggie's going, following the rules in the traffic. And I said, "Get off the road. Go into that construction road. Just go pass all these cars." And I said, I was just urgent that I said, "If you're not going to do it, I'll do it. Let me drive." And she said, "No, the cops will pull us over." And I said, "Yeah, let them pull us over. I'll tell them I'm a general and I'm going to a graduation at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they'll let us go." She said, "You're crazy. They won't let us go." We finally drove all the way there. I was mostly manic. I had totally succumbed to all the urgency. It had completely disrupted the social rhythm. And then it completely annihilated my circadian rhythm because I didn't sleep for 10 seconds that night. I was up all night. out power walking to the gym early, talking to people on the phone. We missed my son's graduation party. We made it to his graduation the next day, but it was terrible.
After listening to General Martin's stories and his dialogue with Dr. Liao, I kept coming back to one question. As academic researchers, what can be learned from General Martin's experiences? The general had previously remarked that his 2-star status may have contributed to his repeated misdiagnosis. So what other assumptions and stereotypes are made when designing treatments for those with mental illnesses? Regardless of your discipline, bench researcher, medical practitioner, pharmacist, social worker, policymaker, how can we translate the information gained through personal stories into better interventions? Dr. Liao shared her thoughts about what she has learned as a researcher and clinician by reading General Martin's book and through their subsequent conversations.
I like to think of our conversation today as a conversation between two bipolar experts. I am a psychiatrist with expertise in treating people with bipolar disorder. And Greg is a bipolar expert by lived experience. It's like you can become an expert in the city Paris if you read a lot of books and you learn all the facts about Paris. But you can also become an expert in Paris by living in Paris. So this is so important because this ability to experience something firsthand, it's so powerful. And so I really feel like ever since we first started chatting few months ago, I feel like I learned so much about what it actually means to be living inside the brain that has bipolar disorder. A lot of the concepts that we talked about today, these are important concepts for us to understand bipolar disorder. But reading the book really makes me appreciate what these concepts mean for people like you. And so what I like to say is that these concepts are not only important for us to understand bipolar disorder, but also potentially as a framework for us to think about early interventions to prevent another episode from happening.
General Martin went on to detail some of the ways that we, as a society, can transform the way we address mental illness.
Everybody in society needs to get training and education on mental health. And one of the pieces of that needs to be the basic symptoms of the most common mental illnesses or mental conditions. I mean, I was around people for years and years. You know, I had a raging bipolar brain, but nobody recognized it because they were completely untrained. That training and education on mental health should be seen the same way we do first aid training. You know, pretty much everybody gets some degree of first aid training. And so, you know, mental health should be on the same level as physical health, at least, if not more so, since the brain is the most important organ. I think we need to figure out how to normalize the conversation about mental health, mental illness. It's so stigmatized, and we need to educate people that it's just as physiologically real to have a mental illness as it is to have diabetes, cancer, heart disease. And we need to teach people that because the stigma is largely based on ignorance and fear. People still think, oh, you have a mental illness because you lack character or you don't have willpower or you're a bad person. And they blame the afflicted person for being ill. It makes no sense at all. In addition to the training and education, we need a society-wide program, kind of like the military has. They call it having a battle buddy. The outside, the civilian world calls it a peer support group, where you have a peer who is a trusted advisor, confidant, someone that will tell it like it is, won't sugarcoat it, and you will not take retribution against them or get mad at them if they tell you something that hurts your feelings. I think you need that. And then, so when you have that battle buddy or that peer, they can observe you and see if there are troubling signs or something that causes concern, and then help you go get evaluated medically. And, maybe there's nothing wrong. Maybe there is something wrong that's concerning. But I think this idea of having a battle buddy or a peer support system throughout the entire society is really important. And you could do it in schools. Like, you could start in kindergarten and, work your way up. I mean, I think society needs to invest more in mental health because it's such a huge problem. And so many of our people with mental illness end up by default in prison where they get worse. I mean, that tells me we need more resources. So we need, as a society, to figure out how to incentivize more people to be brilliant psychiatrists and researchers, also in society and in the military for sure. You need safe channels of conversation. So what do I mean by that? I mean, people saw Greg Martin and many of them probably thought, wow, this guy's really, he's kind of lost it. He's out of control. But they were afraid to say anything. And if we'd have had pre-established safe channels where a lower ranking person could go to somebody who is a peer of mine and say, hey, I'm really concerned about General Martin. Here's what I'm seeing. Could you help him get help? I mean, that's another thing that could have helped. Let me throw in one other little thing that's a huge lesson learned for me. When I was in bipolar hell, crippling, hopeless depression with terrifying delusions and hallucinations, I thought there was no hope, that I was never, ever going to get better. All I wanted to do was die. And I had a friend of mine whose son has bipolar disorder, and he said, Greg, you're going to recover. My son is living a good, happy, healthy life right now. You can do that too. I think it's really important to understand that there is hope, and hope will carry us forward. Because without getting help in treatment, bipolar disorder and other mental illness will destroy families, careers, marriages, finances. It'll lead to addiction, homelessness, prison, death. But with help, you can live a happy, healthy, purposeful life. And I'm living proof of that. And so for anybody out there listening, there is hope. There is always hope. But if you do have a mental condition, you got to start with professional medical help, going and seeing, an expert in the field, somebody like Professor Liao.
Collaborative Endeavors is produced by me, Lauren Rieger, on behalf of the Center for Clinical and Translational Science, aka the CCTS, at the University of Illinois, Chicago. To learn more about Dr. Alex Liao, Major General Greg Martin, and his book, Bipolar General, My Forever War with Mental Illness, visit the links in our show notes. The CCTS is supported by the National Institutes of Health's National Center for Advancing Translational Science through their Clinical and Translational Science Award. Opinions expressed by guests of the show are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of myself, the CCTS, or our funding agencies. You can find more episodes of Collaborative Endeavors on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts. While we do not monetize this podcast, we do love positive feedback. If you like what you hear, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating to help spread the word. To learn more about how you can work with the CCTS to make a positive impact on the health and well-being of our community, visit ccts.uic.edu or follow us on X at UIC CCTS.